Over 70% of teen suicides are kids raised without a father. These are just simple facts, sad facts. 72% of all adolescent murderers are kids raised without a father. There's a real deficit. There's a real deficit. And when some of the first studies were done comparing lesbian parenting with heterosexual parenting, they compared it with single mother parenting, which is not an equal equation. So yeah, there's a real deficit. You have men like our president that overcame real deficits being raised by a single mother. But it's absolutely a deficit. And the last thing we want to do is create a deficit for a child when they come into the world. The logical flaw that was just made by Dr. Smaw was a bit startling, mentioning all this sexual activity on campus without procreation. What does that have to do with marriage producing children? And also the term is responsible procreation. If you do not have the committed relationships, the committed mother, father, husband, wife environment over a period of generations, you will have a breakdown of society. And one more time, 2 men cannot procreate, 2 women cannot procreate. You need some ingredients from a third party of the opposite sex to make it happen. Period.
All right, thank you. I've been made aware that we're up against time, so I'm going to ask each speaker one more question, and then we'll move into the final rebuttal stage of today's debate.
Actually, I have one extra, so you get one.
Yeah, so I'm going to go Dr. Smaw, and then you, Dr. Brown.
So if you want to be fair, it's the last one.
Okay, that's generous. All right, well, Dr. Smaw, let me just... since you kind of requested it in your last question response, let me just ask you the same question I gave Dr. Brown. Why do you, or why should you not, in your case, equivocate social institutions or constructs with biological differences or compatibilities?
Okay, I thought about that question in response to what Dr. Brown said when he was talking about the roles of males and females, and he talked about the role of women is to produce children. And I noticed that a lot of the women in the audience sort of balked at that because you don't think of yourselves as baby factories. And so I would simply say there are a lot of women in the country, certainly a lot of women in here, who don't have children and who don't think of that as their role. And the thing that I wanted to point out is this, that humans get to define who they are or who they'll be over their life. And some of us will say we should have children. Some of us will say we shouldn't. For example, I don't have children. Are you suggesting that I'm out of my role or out of my biological role? And then the claim about responsible sex or something like that, that's a moral claim. Different people disagree with claims about responsible sex. And all of those roles that I noticed that he talked about are all roles that have historically been given to women, but they omit the contemporary roles that people talk about when they say male and female roles.
Thank you, Dr. Smaw. I do believe this is an appropriate time to give both a round of applause and thanks for them answering your questions. And on my and their behalf, I'd like to thank you for giving us the questions. With that said, we're now going to move into the last portion of today's debate in which both speaker is allowed to give a final closing statement to sum up their position in today's debate. We will start with Dr. Smaw.
Okay, so I'll sum up my position, and I'll sum it up straightforwardly. It's a legal one, and it doesn't say anything about religion, or it doesn't say anything about morality, and I'll point out to you that those things kept coming up, even though we agreed at the beginning that this debate would not be about those things. And so that's why I talked a lot about the benefits and burdens of societies. And that's also why I talked a lot about who does what in unequal distribution of weights in society. My position was straightforward and simple. What it says is that when we have benefits and burdens in society, those benefits should be distributed equally among the citizens of society. And of course, I'm talking about the citizens at issue here. And when those benefits and burdens are not distributed equally among the citizens of society, we end up practicing what's called inequality. In fact, that's the very definition of inequality. And I'd add to that that the Supreme Court has said it on multiple occasions, particularly in the case of Lawrence v. Texas. Now, you've heard a lot of things about what goes on in other countries and so on, but I would point out that I stuck to talking about what happens in America. The reason why I stuck to talking about what happens in America is because this is a question about what ought to happen in America. And the people at issue are Americans. So I didn't want to talk about Germany or any other country because those countries and people and so on aren't at issue. And you'd all, at least not in this question. And you'd also note that I stayed away from questions that I said that I would stay away from. Dr. Brown attempted to bait me into a conversation about those questions. And he told you that those questions must be answered in the context of this question. Well, I obviously disagree, because we can answer a question about same-sex marriage without answering a question about incest. Those are two different things. In fact, to put them together results in what's called a conflation fallacy. A conflation fallacy occurs when you take two things, put them together as if they're one. Or it results in a category mistake. And the reason why I could point this out to you is because same-sex couples are asking for the right to marry. But they're not asking for the right to participate in incest or necrophilia or any of the other things that might come up in the context of a conversation like this. So that's why I stayed away from those things. Children, childbearing, performing roles, social roles, and those sorts of things. I said to you that both gay and straight couples can do those equally because in my research, I found research on both sides. The reason why I didn't throw a lot of research out at you, because it would simply have resulted in Dr. Brown and I saying yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and you all would have left out of here thinking that that conversation went nowhere. So I wanted the conversation to go in a more productive and intellectually stimulating direction. And that direction was about the complexities of society. There is no simple answer to any of the questions that we've been tasked with answering. There's no simple answer to it. How do you raise the best child? There are many different ways that people do it. Some people attempt it in way X, but there's no reason to think that way X would result in the best child for everybody. Dr. Brown himself mentioned that when he talked about our president overcoming adversity to a single parent. So, I will say again to you, my position entails that there is no blueprint for raising children for two reasons. First, the complexities of society and the complexities of raising children are multifaceted, and those complexities are diverse. Secondly, the things that you need to raise a healthy child is diverse. Different people have different emotions, different people have different psychologies, and different people have different biologies. If I were to attempt to raise a child and I ignored all those differences and the idiosyncratic nature of my child, no matter what blueprint I imposed, I would obviously make major mistakes because I would ignore what's going on with my particular child. And it seems to me that both gay parents and straight parents can do that. In fact, they already are. The only difference is they haven't been allowed to marry. How do we know that they already are? Because there are many states in this country that allow them to adopt children. There are many states in this country that allow them to become foster parents to children. And many of their children are doing well. In fact, I know some of them personally. I have not articulated a blueprint for raising children because I realize that raising children is not like operating machinery. You might get a blueprint for how to operate your microwave, but of course, your children aren't manufactured products. And you can't operate or produce them all in the exam. In fact, after teaching for a number of years, one of the things that I found is that successful class one semester, the next semester, if I attempted to act the same way, I have to tell the class in individuals who are in the class. So I take the position that I do. Thinking of what will happen in society, that society will adjust. And I went through a litany of things by saying like, man and man, or what have you. It doesn't because it's not popular. But I guarantee you that people years ago, does this sound right to you? A black man and a white, they would have said, of course not.